Hello and welcome to Where the Bush is Burning. I'm your host, Tom Tice, and this is the outreach ministry of Hope Harbor Church. And so we're glad that you've decided to join us today. The title of the playlist is Conversations About Christ, and that's what we intend to do each time that we get together and look into the Word of God to see where Christ appears. It's always a good thing to look for Christ in the Scriptures, and we do just that. And it's lovely to see how he appears, when he appears, where he appears, what he does on behalf of his people, and it can be a great encouragement for us all as we seek to see Christ in the Scriptures. Now, this week we're going to look into an occasion which occurred in the Old Testament. It is a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, and the circumstances are quite extraordinary. The situation occurred in the Babylonian captivity of the nation of Israel. So this story arises out of the 3rd chapter of the book of Daniel. And Daniel has some pretty remarkable stories, and Christ does appear in the book of Daniel on more than one occasion. This particular occasion involves 3 young men. They are called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That is the Babylonian names they received. They had been carried away into captivity. They lived in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar the king. So Nebuchadnezzar had made them officials in the government. That is, they were government workers working for the greater good of the Babylonian Empire, and they were slaves there and had status in the sense that they were given tasks to perform on behalf of Nebuchadnezzar's government. So Nebuchadnezzar decided to build a very large statue. Now, the statue may have been as high as maybe 90 feet, overlaid with gold, and most likely looked very much like Nebuchadnezzar himself. So what he wanted was, he wanted everyone who was involved in the government, everyone who is involved in working under him as part of the empire, to gather together. All these officials were to gather together, and they were all to assemble in the plain of Dura. And the plain of Dura was where the statue, this idol, was set up. And he gave very explicit instructions. He said there's going to be music playing. All the instruments that they were employing are listed in that passage of Scripture. And when the music started to play, everyone who was part of that assembly was to bow down and worship this golden statue, this golden idol, which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So really a form of emperor worship, if you want to put it that way. Most likely, as I say, this looked very much like Nebuchadnezzar, and so it was for his glory, and everyone was to bow down and worship. Well, there were consequences for refusal. He said that anyone who did not bow down and worship was going to be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. And so that was the consequence of non-compliance, was execution, and that in a very horrific sort of manner. So Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego appeared as they were obliged to appear, and when the music started to play, everyone around them began to bow down and worship this golden idol which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not. They refused to bow down to this. Now, we would have to understand the reasons that they refused to bow down was not that they were just being intrinsically rebellious, but there was a matter of conviction here. They believed in the 10 Commandments. God, Jehovah, had given the 10 Commandments to Israel. The 10 Commandments said that the Israelites were to worship no other God other than Jehovah. And the next commandment said that they were not to make any graven images, that they were not to bow down to those images, and they were not to worship them. So on those 2 counts, these young men had religious convicted reasons religious convictions that prohibited them from complying. So they refused to bow down to this idol which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Well, they did the right thing. That they lived according to their convictions. They were following what God had said. However, they understood that there was a consequence for this, and the net result was that people who saw that they refused to comply went to Nebuchadnezzar and they told on them. And they said, there are these certain Jews and they don't bow down or didn't bow down to your idol. And so because they didn't bow down to your idol, then of course the consequence was that they were supposed to be thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Well, the first thing that happened was that Nebuchadnezzar had them brought in before him so that he could have a conversation with them about this. And when he did, these young men were not a bit backward about coming forwards, as the saying goes. They were firm in their convictions. They said, we understand that this is the consequence. We're not really careful or backwards in answering you with regard to this. We're not able to do this. Now, if our God chooses to deliver us, well and good. If he does not choose to deliver us, well, that's fair enough. We are still not going to bow down and worship your idol. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, being king, was enraged, very, very enraged by their refusal and by their calmness in refusing. And so he sent to the soldiers and said he wanted the furnace heated 7 times hotter than it was normally used to being heated. So that was his order because he wanted to express how angry he was to be refused. And of course this was going to set a precedent. They refused to worship his idol, and he wanted everyone to know how unhappy and how displeased he was and what the consequence was going to be. So they heated the furnace 7 times hotter, and then they took the men immediately, did not change their clothing. They tied them up, and with everything that they had, their hats and their cloaks and shoes and everything else, just tied them up. They took them down and they threw these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, into the furnace. Well, the furnace was so hot, according to the story, that the flames reached out and consumed the soldiers who had actually thrown them in. So that's how genuinely hot it was. That's how lethal this furnace was. So these 3 men were then in the furnace. Now then, the king was watching. He didn't miss this. And as he was watching, something happened. The 3 men didn't burn. Not only did they not burn, but their ropes with which they had been bound came off. And beyond that, there was a 4th individual who was there in the furnace with them. And Nebuchadnezzar says to the people that are around him, didn't we throw 3 men into the fiery furnace? And there is a 4th there. And then he says, depending on how you understand the language that's being used there, he says, the form of the 4th is like the Son of God, or you may interpret it as a son of the gods. But the fact of the matter is, as far as he was concerned, there was a supernatural being who was there. The form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So, what happened next was that Nebuchadnezzar came down to outside of the furnace, and he very politely asked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego if they would come forth out of the burning fiery furnace, because they were loose. They were walking around in the furnace, and Christ was there with them, the pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. So when this happened, he asked them to come forth, and when they did walk out of the furnace, the story says that there was not even the smell of smoke upon them. They did not even They did not suffer any damage whatsoever. The ropes were gone. The garments that they were wearing did not even smell like smoke. So this was an extremely remarkable sort of a deliverance. Now, here is where Christ comes into this. In this particular situation, these young men were doing the right thing and did not know ahead of time that they were going to be delivered. Excuse me. If you read the account, what they say is that God is able to deliver us, but if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. We're still not going to bow down and worship your idol which you have set up. Well, Christ in this particular instance did deliver them out of the burning fiery furnace. And it left such an impression with Nebuchadnezzar that he put out a prohibition across the whole of his realm that no one could say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So in this particular context, Christ came to deliver his people in a most remarkable way. Now, why is this important to us? Well, it's important for us to understand the things of which Christ is genuinely capable. Now, in more modern times, we've heard other stories of very, very remarkable deliverances and how Christ has drawn near to his people. Hebrews assures us that he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And the follow-on to that verse is that we can boldly say that God is our helper and we will not fear what man can do to us. So, there are other instances in the scriptures where God has delivered his people in most remarkable ways. He does not always do it that way. There are times when he delivers his people from death. There are times when he delivers his people by death, so that they are ushered into his presence in a very short space of time. So you can't always say that it's going to occur in one particular way. It's according to the will of God. It's according to what is going to bring God the glory. And so he does not always necessarily deliver people in this remarkable manner that we see in the story that we're discussing today. However, he can. He's capable of that. And the point here really is that these young men were willing to do what was right before God in spite of what threats were being leveled against them if they did not do the wrong thing. So they chose to do the right thing, chose to honor God, chose to do what was according to his word and his will, and to let the consequences be whatever they were. Now, in this particular context, Christ delivered them, and that's tremendous. Makes for a tremendous story to tell as to how Christ can deliver his people. Now, he may do it in that way, he may not do it in that way, but in this particular instance, he certainly did. And it's a tremendous thing for us to know that Christ is able to deliver and may very well do so according to his will, even though the circumstances are very much against us. It is always important for us to do the will of God. It's always important for us to follow his word and to follow his way and to do what he has told us we should do in order to glorify him. So it's not a bad thing to do that. That may bring us into conflict with others who have authority. King Nebuchadnezzar certainly had authority, and he could have people executed if he chose to do so. Well, doing the right thing may bring us into a hard situation, and we have to, like these young men, be prepared to stand on our convictions, to stand on whatever's right, and to do whatever's right, and to accept the consequences. Will God, in every case, deliver us in such a fantastic way in which he did these young men? Well, maybe, maybe not. We can't ever tell. However, what I want you to notice here is that Christ personally became involved in the situation with these young men. He personally appeared to deliver them. He personally kept them from harm. And what he was able to do for them, he's certainly able to do for us. We don't know how he's going to resolve every situation in which we encounter. However, we do have confidence that he can resolve it to glorify himself. He will do what is wisest and best for us according to his larger overarching plan. But this is an interesting conversation about Christ. It's good for us to know the things of which Christ is capable. It's good to see what he has done in the past for people who have trusted in him and been willing to do what was right regardless of what anyone else was doing at the time. Now, if you've enjoyed this, our channel is called Where the Bush is Burning. We would like for you to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe perhaps if you would like to subscribe to the channel. Make sure your notifications are on the right settings so that you can get these notifications when we put out a new video. If you want to read the devotional that comes out every day, then I would recommend that you look up hopeharbor.church. That's Hope Harbor, all one word, hopeharbor.church. And you're certainly welcome to look at the blog and get our devotional every day. You can find it on Substack under Where the Bush is Burning, so you can get it sent to your email directly, and I would recommend, if you want to do that, that you do that. But certainly like and subscribe. If you enjoy watching these videos, do that. Get the devotional and read it, hopeharbor.church, hopeharbor.church, and share it with your friends. Make sure, once again, your notifications are set properly. So thank you very much for watching today. We hope that you'll continue to watch next week as we have another conversation about Christ here at Where the Bush is Burning. I'm your host again, Tom Tice. Very happy that you have decided to watch today. All the best for you and yours for the incoming week.